Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something I think we can all relate to.
Yeah.
Relationships.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the should we get married or not,
Right.
and all that fun stuff. And the way we're going to look at this is through the lens of this really, really fascinating discussion that we found online.
This is one of those things that just gets people talking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And, it's raw, it's honest, and, honestly, I think it's surprisingly relatable. And that's really where you come in, dear listeners. We go through this. We really want you to kind of think about your own experiences and see what resonates with you.
Yeah, we're all on this journey together, and sometimes hearing other people's stories, it can help us kind of figure out our own.
So true.
You know what I mean?
So true.
So grab a drink, settle in, and let's get ready to dive deep.
Okay, so let's set the scene here.
Yeah.
We've got this 28-year-old woman, and she decides to break up with her 40-year-old boyfriend of 5 years. Okay.
And the reason.
He doesn't want to get married, even though she's made it clear over and over again that that's what she wants.
And this is where things get interesting. Because you go through the comments and immediately you see a lot of people jumping to conclusions about the boyfriend's motives.
Oh, totally. I mean, love bombing is the phrase that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
And so people are saying he's suddenly being more affectionate, he's doing chores,
Right.
and it's all just a desperate attempt to get her back, but not out of love.
And it's really important that we define love bombing just so that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, for sure.
Love bombing is when someone just showers another person with just way too much attention and affection, and it's often used to manipulate or control them.
Right, like a charm offensive on overdrive.
Exactly. And it can be a huge red flag in a relationship.
And the commenters are not holding back,
Oh, no, they're not.
like, at all. There's ones like, he's such a loser, leave, don't look back.
Oh, wow.
And don't fall for this. Or, at 28, you will actually truly ruin your life.
Yeah, and I think it's clear that people are really concerned about this woman,
Wow.
They don't want her to get back together with someone who clearly wasn't meeting her needs.
Right.
But, at the same time, it's really important to acknowledge that not every sudden shift in behavior is manipulative.
Right. Not always black and white.
Exactly.
Like sometimes something big happens, like a breakup, and it can genuinely make someone look inward and want to change.
That's true.
Right. The challenge, of course, is figuring out if those changes are real or if they're just because they're afraid of losing the person.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to looking beyond those surface level actions and trying to understand what's really motivating them. Are these changes who they actually are deep down?
That's a really good point. And, it's not just about this one couple. It's
Right.
tapping into this bigger thing about, what society expects from relationships and commitment and all that, like what we should be doing by a certain age.
Absolutely. There's this unspoken pressure, and I think it's especially true for women to be married and settled down by a certain time.
Totally.
And that pressure can make it hard to see red flags or to walk away from a situation that isn't really right for you,
So true. Yeah, and speaking of red flags, the age gap between this couple is another thing people are talking about in the comments.
For sure.
A lot of people are pointing out that, when there's a big age difference, there can be some power imbalances.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, age itself doesn't automatically mean that you're compatible or not compatible.
Right.
But it is important to acknowledge that you might have different life experiences or maturity levels.
Yeah, different expectations about the relationship.
Right.
There's a comment here that really jumped out at me. A 35-year-old man goes after early 20s women because other 35-year-old women won't put up with his shit.
Ouch.
Right.
I mean, that's a pretty harsh statement.
Yeah.
But it does reflect this kind of societal reality we see sometimes, where older men sometimes get more leeway to date younger women.
And, that can lead to some tricky dynamics, especially if one partner is ready to settle down
Yeah.
and the other one's still figuring things out, like they're on totally different timelines.
It's almost like those timelines will never actually meet.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us back to this idea of knowing yourself and what you won't compromise on in a relationship.
Totally. What are your non-negotiables? Those values and those behaviors, those goals that you just absolutely need to feel loved and respected and fulfilled.
Right. And are those things present in your current relationship? That's something we should all be asking ourselves.
Definitely. And that's where these comments can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Because you get a glimpse into other people's experiences, their struggles, their successes, what they've learned.
There's this one that really stuck with me. When I was young, I married a guy like this. He didn't want to commit, but couldn't let me go either. We didn't make it to our first anniversary.
Yeah.
I know. It's heartbreaking, But it's also empowering to see how she moved on and found happiness.
It really shows how resilient we are as humans, you know? Even from the most painful experiences, we can still grow and learn.
So true. And it just highlights that sometimes walking away, even
Yeah.
though it's hard, can be so courageous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on that note, if you're finding this deep dive thought-provoking and insightful and all that good stuff, uh, we'd love for you to support Voices of the Soul.
Yes.
Hit that like button on Shauna Palash's YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast.
It really does help us reach more people
It really does.
who are looking for this kind of honest and open conversation.
Okay, so let's get back to these comments. There's a whole thread here about regret
Yeah.
and the lessons that people have learned from their past relationships. And I think you're going to find it super powerful.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's dive in. One of the things that just jumps out at me is how many people are sharing their own stories about heartbreak and what they've learned.
Yeah, it's almost like this online forum has become this place for everyone to think back and support each other.
Totally.
And what I think is really interesting is that even though everyone's coming from their own unique experience, there are still these common themes, you know? Like figuring yourself out, having the courage to walk away, realizing that sometimes letting go is the best way to find something better.
So true. And there's this one phrase that I keep seeing pop up that's both interesting and kind of unsettling.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
Bang maid.
Yeah, that's a term that definitely has a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And sadly, I think a lot of people, especially women, can relate to that dynamic.
Can you explain it for those who might not know what it means?
Sure. Basically, bang maid refers to a situation where one partner is doing most of the housework, the emotional support, all the caretaking stuff,
Right.
while the other partner is just benefiting from it without really giving back in a meaningful way.
And we see hints of this in the comments about this couple. Yeah.
Like, there's this feeling that she was doing all the heavy lifting in the relationship, emotionally and practically, while he was just kind of coasting.
Exactly. There's a comment here that I think sums it up perfectly. He was enjoying that homosexual lifestyle.
Okay. I mean, the term itself might be a little harsh, but it does point to this pattern where one partner is taking advantage of the other person's willingness to do everything.
Right. Like she was the romantic partner, the housekeeper, the therapist, all rolled into one.
And he wasn't exactly stepping up to share the load.
Exactly. And it's important to point out that this can happen in any relationship.
Yeah.
Not just those with a big age gap, but sometimes age differences can make these issues worse, especially when traditional gender roles come into play.
There's a comment here that suggests that maybe this was part of the appeal for the boyfriend all along. Some older guys date younger so they can reset the clock on commitment, kids, marriage, etc. Then the woman gets to an age of being ready for these things and they panic. That's such a good point, and it really highlights how important it is to be honest with yourself and your partner about what you want in life and in the relationship.
For sure.
Are you really on the same page, or is one person hoping to put things off while the other is ready to move forward?
It's like the younger partner is almost enabling the older partner's avoidance of commitment without even realizing it.
Right, and as time goes by, that resentment can build up on both sides.
Totally. And I just want to be clear, it's not like all relationships with age gaps are bad or unhealthy,
Of course not.
but you have to be aware of those potential problems and talk openly and honestly about what you both want for the future.
Couldn't agree more. And it's also important to remember that we all have the right to change our minds.
Yeah.
As we grow and evolve, what we wanted in our 20s might not be what we want in our 30s or 40s.
And that's what makes this woman's decision to break up so powerful.
Absolutely.
She realized that waiting for him to change wasn't doing anything for her anymore.
It-
There's a comment here that says it all. Don't waste time on a guy who needs to get his ego hurt in order to see your worth.
Wow.
Right. It's a reminder that we teach people how to treat us by what we put up with.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes walking away is the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for the other person.
Sometimes it's the only way to create space for something better.
So true. And I know it can be really tough,
Oh, absolutely.
especially when you've been with someone for years and built a life together. But sometimes it's the only way to grow.
You know, it's not just about romantic relationships either.
Right.
This applies to family, friends, colleagues, anyone.
Yeah. Setting those boundaries and speaking up for yourself can be uncomfortable, but it's crucial for healthy relationships.
I was just going to say that speaking of healthy relationships, I'm seeing some comments about the importance of protecting your assets, especially for women who own homes.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of advice for the original poster to be careful about adding her boyfriend's name to the deed even if they get back together.
Yeah. Right. It's about being smart and protecting yourself financially, especially if there's a history of one partner taking advantage of the other.
It's not about being cynical. It's about being realistic
Totally.
and making sure you're not putting yourself in a vulnerable position.
Love and finances are a tricky mix.
That's for sure. Which brings us to another important point,
Uh,
settling.
ugh, yeah.
One commenter asked, is the only way for him to treat you well to actually end the relationship?
Ooh, that's a tough one, but it is something a lot of people face.
Yeah, staying in a relationship, that's okay, but not great just because you're afraid of being alone or starting over.
It's easy to get stuck in that trap, especially when you have all this societal pressure telling you you should be married with kids by a certain age.
Oh, for sure.
But real happiness comes from living a life that's true to you, not from trying to meet someone else's expectations.
And so many of these comments are saying that. People are talking about leaving relationships that weren't right for them even after years together
Yeah.
and finding real love and happiness on the other side.
It's never too late to change what you want in a relationship and create a life that truly makes you happy.
So true. And speaking of making things happen, if this deep dive is giving you some food for thought, we'd love for you to support Voices of the Soul.
Yes, please.
Like this episode on Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast.
It really helps us keep these conversations going and reach more people who are looking for this kind of open and honest dialogue.
Okay, so let's dive back into these comments. There's a thread here about self-discovery and finding love later in life that I think is incredibly inspiring.
I'm all ears.
It's amazing how one story about a breakup can get so many people talking about relationships and expectations and what it really means to be happy.
Yeah, it really just shows how much we all crave connection, but figuring out love and commitment, it's not always easy.
Totally. And I've noticed a lot of the comments are saying that sometimes you have to walk away from a relationship for the other person to realize what they lost. But is that always the right move?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, sometimes a breakup can be a wake-up call,
Yeah.
It can make people really look at themselves and want to change, but that's not always how it goes.
Right.
And I think, more importantly, it shouldn't be the only reason you end a relationship.
Exactly. It's not about playing games or trying to make someone change.
Right.
It's about knowing when something's not right for you anymore
Mm,
and having the courage to put yourself first, no matter what the other person thinks.
I love that.
One commenter put it perfectly, don't waste time on a guy who needs to get his ego hurt in order to see your worth.
Mm,
You deserve to be with someone who sees your worth from the beginning,
absolutely.
not just when they're afraid of losing you.
Exactly.
Mm.
And sometimes even when that wake-up call does happen, it's too late,
Right.
There's a comment here from someone who went through that. My ex did this. It's love bombing. All his promises didn't last. He went back on all the promises he made within a year. Yeah. It's a reminder that actions speak louder than words, especially when those words are said in a moment of panic or fear.
Right. Like another commenter said, give it a month and it will be back to the same old routine. No one changes in a day.
So true. Patience and observation are key,
Yeah.
If someone is really serious about changing, you'll see it in their actions over time, not just in grand gestures or moments of attention.
So true. And this brings up another big point. Settling.
Settling.
One commenter asked, is the only way for him to treat you well to actually end the relationship?
It's a question a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, staying in a relationship that's just okay out of fear or
Yeah.
because you don't want to start over.
It's so easy to get stuck there, especially with all the pressure to be married with kids by a certain age.
Totally.
But true happiness comes from living a life that's authentic to you, not from trying to meet someone else's expectations.
And so many of these comments are echoing that. People are talking about leaving relationships that weren't right, even after years together.
Yeah.
And finding real love and happiness afterwards.
It's a beautiful thing to see. It shows you that it's never too late to change what you want and create a life that you truly love.
Exactly. It's about knowing that you deserve to be with someone who celebrates you and supports you and inspires you to be your best self.
And sometimes that means choosing yourself even when it's hard.
So powerful. And if you're feeling inspired by this conversation and you want to support Voices of the Soul, make sure to hit that like button on Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel and subscribe.
We appreciate your support so much.
It really does help us keep these conversations going and reach even more people who are looking for guidance and connection.
And a sense of belonging.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and self-discovery. And remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself.
So true.
So nurture that relationship. Honor your worth. and never settle for anything less than you deserve.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep listening to your soul and stay true to yourself.